I went back and forth on how to do this, but I think it's time to A, bring out a few magnets I haven't used before, and B, find like a panic index way of doing this. Because that's really, in all honesty, the only way I can do this now. I can't rate 1 through 31 anymore when it comes to my favorite teams. Now, this angry face down here, that's not me, that's the fans of those teams when I reveal where they're at. The maybe is that's me going, oh, I don't know until the game starts where I'm going to be cheering, and the happy face is kind of me, but there should be an angry face probably up here too, because there'll be people that don't like the teams that I cheer for. And this again, it always ends up kind of in flux. So I'm going to go alphabetically because that's always the most fun to do this for me. In terms of do I cheer for them? Yes, maybe, and this depends on the situation. I'll definitely go through this and discuss how it's changed in the last year, so people can fast forward to the end and ignore it. And no, for teams that I don't find myself cheering for this year. So we're starting with Anaheim, and Anaheim is above a maybe right now. You know, we caught the game between Anaheim and Arizona, and I was legit cheering for Anaheim. And that was weird, because there's no way I would have been cheering for Arizona last year, the year before. I really like the young kids Anaheim's got coming up. I really like what the team's doing. I think there's a lot of positives there. Which means that when you get to Arizona, I have Arizona as a solid maybe. And that's absolutely the face before a game starts with like, am I cheering for them? Am I not? The one thing with Arizona, the one thing that does make it tough is that they do struggle with scoring goals. And so it is one of those things that you know, I want to see them do well, but it's not the most exciting brand of hockey that they're playing. And definitely when I'm covering 31 teams and I'm going around to every single game, the teams that play that up-tempo style, I'm more likely to cheer for unless they wear a jersey I just can't stand. In which case, right? And again, all of the hate stuff that I had 4 years ago when this channel started up, most of that's gone. I will say this, and this is the honest truth, that when Boston loses Game 7 last year, and, you know, I was upset. And then the next day I saw the numbers that live stream had generated and the revenues that we're going to pay for, you know, part of our upcoming holiday. I felt a lot better. So when I say I don't feel that same level of anger I used to, it's true. When you're doing this and you're you know, that's your job, it definitely isn't the same level of anger. So yeah, that was very enlightening when I was like, you know what? And I thought to myself too, I thought, you know what? There are people tuning in to watch me watch the Bruins lose, excited that the Bruins are losing, one. And two, there's going to be trolls tuning in just going, hey, I can't wait for the Bruins to lose. We're going to watch this stupid face. Yeah, well, you know, as long as you're driving up my numbers, bewildering. Boston, of course, is a yes. Boston, of course, you know, I've mentioned Boston. Obviously, Boston's going to be a yes. And Boston's going to be a heavy yes. Now, has that been affected during what we're going through right now? Absolutely. So I'm not letting Jeremy Jacobs off the hook. I am not letting the Boston Bruins off the hook either. And once we get back to hockey, whenever that is, we're not having that debate in this video. Whenever we get back to hockey, we'll see if it affects how I feel about the team. I'm still torn on the subject because, again, you know, you've got to treat your employees like human beings. That's important. Buffalo, you know, it depends, but honestly, I mean, I love what Eichel does. I get excited with what Eichel's doing, but I would probably put Buffalo on the lower side. This comes down to the Dwayne argument again, where I find myself kind of feeling defeated in even thinking about cheering for Buffalo. And at the start of the year, again, it felt like they were getting better, and I thought, okay, good. We're finally going to see Buffalo getting better, and then they imploded again. And I was like, again, come on. It's sort of like when you don't want to lose your faith in your kid, but you have and you can't tell them. And, you know, all parents do that. Eventually, at some point, your eyes glass over, and you're like, let's have another one, because this one's a lost cause. No, I believe in you, my daughter. What's your name again? It doesn't matter. So we're up to Calgary. Calgary, I'm putting on the downside as well. I don't usually cheer for Calgary. I don't actively cheer against Calgary either. This is where, when I'm trying to figure out like a top 31, it gets a lot more difficult. Because if Buffalo's against Calgary, who do I cheer for? I don't know that I cheer for either. I think I just sit and enjoy a game. So, where a few years ago I could say, oh, I would definitely cheer for Buffalo. Or I might say at one point in time, oh, I would definitely cheer for Calgary over Buffalo. Right now, I don't know. I think I would just sit, enjoy the game, and be fine with it. Now, if either of them are against Arizona, I'm cheering for the Coyotes. So that's the difference. Carolina. Carolina, I'm going to put them equal to Anaheim. I am far more likely to be cheering for Carolina, which will surprise some Carolina fans. I do sometimes get accused of being anti-Carolina. The one thing for me is I've never seen prolonged success from them. So this year I predicted that they would end up missing the playoffs. Part of that was just because that's what they do. They make the playoffs, they go on a run, and then they miss the playoffs. It's sort of like I predicted Philadelphia to make the playoffs this year, not because I thought Philadelphia was going to be a lot better, but because Philadelphia doesn't miss the playoffs in back-to-back years. It just doesn't happen. So Carolina, for me, I do like Carolina. I like their young kids. I do have concerns with their goaltending. I absolutely have concerns with their goaltending, but yes. Chicago. I'm not likely to be cheering for Chicago. Now, it's not Chelsea Dagger. Chelsea Dagger, I think, is a perfect earworm to drive the other team completely insane and to drive opposing fans insane. It does exactly what you want it to do. But I don't find myself cheering for Chicago. And that's just the way that it's been for a long time now. Although, back in 2015, that Stanley Cup Finals and Stanley Cup victory, I had a lot of respect for them for what they were doing and for what they had done. So my 2016 list, I had them in the top 10. So it's not again, this is a fluid list. That's why I'm doing it the way I'm doing it today. Colorado's been very exciting this year. And no matter how the season ends, or if the season's already over, that's fine too. But Colorado has a lot going for them going into the near and distant future as well. It's not like they're in a Boston situation where they have to win in the next year or two, or half their core is going to be over the hill. They're pretty solidly built for a long time to come. And I mean, it starts with that first line, but there's more than that. I love the Kadri pickup. Picking up Nazem Kadri, I think, was brilliance. And there are others. Gerard being added. Nobody thought it was a big deal at the time. I thought Gerard was fantastic. And that I thought was a huge bonus for Colorado in a trade that, they did pretty darn well in to begin with. But adding Gerard was brilliant. Columbus, as the year went along, I did find myself thinking, you know what? I want this Elvis thing. I want them to find themselves in the playoffs. So if you have Colorado against Carolina, or Columbus against Carolina, who am I cheering for? Well, again, that's one of those it depends kind of things. And so I have them equal on here because it depends on the situation. If Carolina's in a playoff spot already, and so Columbus needs 2 points to get into the playoffs, I'll be cheering for Columbus that night. Opposite situation's true, I'll probably be cheering for Carolina. I like what Columbus has done. I think it's been very eye-opening what they've done in terms of maintaining their spot in the league as well as they could until injuries just became everybody and eventually dragged them down. But Columbus, I have found myself kind of rooting for them. Dallas, everybody knows where Dallas is going. Dallas is a yes. If Dallas is against Boston, it depends on the situation. So this is something I've tried to explain before too, where if Vancouver, Boston, Dallas, any mixture of those three teams up against each other, in fact, I'm just going to go ahead because everybody knows, so it's not going to be a surprise that Vancouver, Boston, and Dallas, when these three teams are up against each other, it depends on the situation as to who I'm cheering for. So if Boston's in a playoff spot and they're doing really well and Vancouver is nowhere near a playoff spot, I'm cheering for Boston to win that game. Then Vancouver should be getting a better shot at the draft lottery, right? And Boston gets a better standing. Now you reverse that, and Boston's nowhere near the playoffs, and Vancouver's going for a higher seed in the playoffs. I'm cheering for Vancouver. And it's the same thing with Dallas when Dallas is against Boston or Dallas is against Vancouver. So those three, while yes, it's Vancouver, Boston, and Dallas as 1, 2, 3, it does depend on the situation when they play against one another. Vancouver's definitely the team I followed the most, but it's not that far ahead of Boston or Dallas, other than for term. And just for the fact that I'm right near Vancouver, so I'm going to hear a lot more Vancouver news over the last 3.5 decades than I will somebody else. Now that we have the internet, it kind of evens out. Detroit will put with Arizona as a maybe. And it depends on the situation, and we'll see what happens as they get better. This year, Detroit just miserably bad, and that was by design. That was sort of a Steve Yzerman coming in and going, well, this doesn't work, and deciding, okay, I could maybe make some moves to fix things, but we're gonna have to go through some pain here first. And I respect that. I do. I respect Yzerman for doing that and being honest about it. Because it gets into that whole intentional tank. It wasn't an intentional tank. It was just the Wings were bad. And there wasn't really any way around it other than making them mediocre, and then maybe they end up 5th or 6th from the bottom of the league, but they're still not going to make the playoffs. So, Detroit is a maybe for me, and we'll see what happens this coming year if they get better as to whether or not I'm cheering for them more. The Oilers I'll put down equal to Buffalo, Calgary. Probably not up in the level of these guys, but it's not as bad as people might make it out to be. I know the thing that gets thrown at me a lot is, well, he doesn't like this team, so therefore, I've never allowed that to cloud where I predict a team's going to end up. I've never allowed it to cloud my opinion or coverage. I don't cover any one team any more than any other. I do my best not to do that. When the channel started out, I definitely did, but as things have gone out, I've tried to make sure that I'm continuing to support. That's why I make sure I'm doing playlists, and it's all 31 teams. One of the reasons I decided to do the Montreal-Boston series yesterday was I realized I was up to 2008, and I thought, I'm covering a lot of the Western Conference matchups. I need to do more Eastern ones as well. So that's why I went with what I did. And then the 2009 one I have yet to set up the board for today is an Eastern Conference matchup, because I thought, I need to do more of those. And when I do the rivalries, I have to make sure I'm balancing it out. So, the Oilers, I can't say that I'm cheering for them, but I'm not I can't stand these guys. They're a lot of fun to watch. But again, they're against Vancouver regularly. They're against Dallas. Let's see. So there you go. Florida. Florida goes just below that absolute yes category. Florida, I'm usually cheering for. They're making it hard though, because every year I'm like, okay, this is going to get better. This is going to get better. This has to get, and then it doesn't. And yeah, I feel kind of duped here, where this is going to be better. It's like you're going into a Friday the 13th movie and going, this one's going to be so much better than the last one. You watch it, you go, why is this not better than, why is he in New York? That's Vancouver. It's not even New York. So that's kind of how I feel with Florida right now, is that we're up to kind of chase and takes Manhattan territory. And I'm kind of, I got to be honest, I'm kind of checking out a little bit, because they always seem to find a way not to make it. They fix something and you go, okay, so they fixed their weakness. Here they come. They're going to be a playoff team, and then it just doesn't happen. So I don't know how you fix it when the entire roster, when you look at it on paper, you go, that's a pretty good roster. And then they go out on the ice and you go, nope, okay, just crumple that up and throw it up. The LA Kings. The Kings are moving up. I'm going to have the Kings right here, equidistant or equivalent to these teams here. The LA Kings would have been right down here in no territory as recently as last year. And honestly, with the young kids they got coming up, they finally got Cal Peterson on the roster regularly now that they moved on from Jack Campbell. I like what the Kings are doing. And again, it depends on the situation, but they kind of convinced me on that run they were going on there, where for a month and a half they were at 12-1-1 or 12-2-1, something along those lines. Yeah, ridiculous run they were on, and they looked good. This wasn't just they're on a hot streak. It was their offense was clicking, their defense was playing well, and their goaltending looked solid. There wasn't anything in their game that you could say, well, this is just a hot streak. It was just really, really well played hockey. And you can kind of see that now with a new coach behind the bench, that eventually they start buying in, they start playing a new style, and it could absolutely lead to something better for them next year. Minnesota, I want to say I cheer for Minnesota when they're playing. I generally don't. And it's the same reason that my wife talks about. She's a fan of Minnesota, but she admits they're boring to watch. And so in cheering for Winnipeg and Minnesota, she very frequently ends up watching the Winnipeg game if both of them are playing. And I'll ask her, like, why aren't you watching the Wild game? They're winning. And she's like, it's boring. It's a boring game. I don't want to watch it. So, yeah, Minnesota I have in that area. Montreal. You guys know where Montreal's going, right? And that's how that works. As a Boston fan, Montreal has to, and as a Montreal fan, you have to have Boston down here. This is an agreement we've had as Montreal and Boston fans for decades, for probably about a century, and I don't see any reason to mess with that right now. Now, am I excited about some of the young players from Montreal? Absolutely. Do I cheer when they score on occasion? Absolutely. Am I going to admit that in this video? No. Why would I admit that? Nashville. Nashville, honestly, I don't find myself cheering for Nashville now like I did, say, 2-3 years ago. I don't actively root against anybody, but again, if they're against these teams on the board, I'm going to be cheering for the teams that are above them. If they're against Chicago, equal. I can't say whether I would necessarily be cheering for Nashville or Chicago in that situation because it depends on the situation. I know those teams have games with each other. I'm watching. I know that. That's one thing as well that's changed between 4 years ago and now is when I see some of these games on a schedule, I'm like, oh, that's going to be an interesting game. I got to watch that. And Chicago and Nashville is one of those very interesting games. New Jersey. New Jersey, at this point, I'm going to put them with Minnesota in the, again, I'm going to have them above some other teams and below some other teams. I definitely found myself rooting for them as underdogs after the Taylor Hall trade. And it'll be interesting to see with New Jersey what they do this coming season. I'm not ruling them out. I know in the standings video I did yesterday, I had them at 8th. Just because I don't see any of the other teams in the Metro necessarily falling back. You can make an argument for any team in the Metro to fall back next year and any team in the Metro to move forward. The Metro is absolutely solid. So for me, the Islanders are in that spot. Or the New Jersey Devils are in that spot. The Islanders, I'm going to throw them right here. I don't know. They're in much the same situation as Minnesota. I just don't find their games to be all that exciting. And you know, I like their coach. I like Barry Trotz. I like the individual players. But if a game is on and the Islanders are playing, I don't find that I'm all that, you know, into the game necessarily. There's a lot of low scoring games, a lot of kind of sitting back. They rely on their goaltending a lot, and I don't know. It's not conducive to me jumping out of my seat kind of like I ever sit down. I've been asked that in a live stream. I'm going to tell you right now, I don't sit down. I get up in the morning out of bed and I walk around. I don't have a chair in my room here that I sit on. I've got a stool which has always got stuff on it. I don't sit down as a general rule, and I'm on my feet until I go to bed at night. So that's just one of those things. New York Rangers. New York Rangers. You know what? Towards the end of this season, I got to admit, I did something I thought I'd never do. I was cheering for the Rangers. Absolutely cheering for the Rangers. And I have never... if you went back 1994 and you said, hey, so Shannon, stop eating out of that jar of peanut butter. Come here for a second. You're going to be cheering for the Rangers in the year 2020. I would have said, do we have hover cars? And then I would have been disappointed we don't have hover cars. And then I would have followed that up with, I'm cheering for the Rangers? Why? Was there a head injury? Did I get concussed? So that's legit. I never thought I'd see the day I was cheering for the Rangers, but I'll be darned. Shesterkin's amazing run, and Panarin's amazing run, and everything else that's been going on with the Rangers, it's fun to watch. They are a fun team to watch. I want to see how far this can go. I think they're legit. I think they're a lot of fun to watch, and I'm kind of sort of enthused about next season. What could they like this season? Whether they do or don't make the playoffs is one thing, but if they manage to actually, you know, keep this up into next season, it'd be really interesting to see what happens. I think Shesterkin's fantastic. Ottawa, I'm gonna put them right here with Rangers in Colorado. And yes, a little bit below Florida. But I'm going to put them with the Rangers in Colorado. Ottawa, I'll be interested to see what happens with them this coming season. and whether or not they actually, I don't know, whether or not they're actually on the upswing, or if this is going to work. We're going to start to see this coming season whether or not the rebuild in Ottawa has worked. So, yeah, I have Ottawa at that level. They surprised me with some victories this year. They made me laugh a bit with some of their victories this year. I'm like, seriously, wow. And there was a lot of heart on this team as well. And I thought they were well coached. I thought that was part of the story too. Philadelphia. Philadelphia, I'm going to put right here with Columbus, Carolina, and Anaheim. And again, it depends on the situation. Now, Philadelphia went through that Western swing that just tanked them. I was like, oh, I guess Philadelphia, was wrong. I guess they might miss the playoffs 2 years in a row. And then they went on this great run. And, I found myself cheering for them towards the end of it. I found myself kind of caught up in it. And the idea that, Giroux is getting older. And if he's going to take a run at a championship, he's probably going to need to do that over the next year or two. And so I did find myself kind of caught up in the emotions of that. And so, yeah, Philadelphia for me, pretty solid overall. And I like their future as well. Carter Hart, pretty solid goaltender. And, yeah, so Philadelphia, I have a little bit above the maybes. Pittsburgh knows where they're going. So, again, Pittsburgh, fans of this channel for a long time, and we understand this. And again, it comes down to my fandom with Boston, right? Pittsburgh has broken Boston hearts a few times. And yes, Boston's beaten out Pittsburgh once or twice, but if you look at the overall grand scheme of things, and I'm going to be doing up some fun boards over the next few days and some fun looks at which teams have broken my heart the most in the playoffs, that kind of thing, just for fun, just a fun little board. And Pittsburgh. Yeah, I don't find myself cheering for Pittsburgh. I will say this, though. Again, when they were rallying, while they didn't have anybody in their lineup, they had everybody injured. I thought that was inspirational. I thought that was great. And they were number one on my power rankings for a while. So, again, I'm as fair as I can be with Pittsburgh, and they're a good story. And I hope that story continues because, honestly, much like I say, the NHL is more interesting when Montreal's in the playoffs, when Montreal's got something to play for. The NHL is always more interesting when you have Pittsburgh, who I would rank up with Boston as being like some of the ultimate villains in the NHL. And in Boston's case, it's earned over the decades, I'll admit that. In Pittsburgh, it's normally just fans of other teams that are sick of losing to Pittsburgh, and they just want to see somebody stick it to Pittsburgh. And so, it's different reasoning, but I understand both. San Jose. San Jose for me, coming into this year, I found myself, hoping, thinking maybe, now they're in the maybe category. This year was tough. And when you see a team that's built to win, which I thought they were last year, and then they make this decision to keep Karlsson and to kind of let go of the heart of the team at the same time. I still don't understand that. I find myself not able to understand that at all. So, yeah, it depends on the situation. Am I cheering for them? Maybe, maybe not. I was pretty ticked off with the decisions that were made over the summer. As somebody who felt like, I may finally be able to cheer for the Sharks for the first time in decades. Right now, they're in the maybe category. And again, this is where things are different and why I can't do 1 through 31. If the LA Kings are against San Jose right now, I'm probably cheering for LA because of the run LA's been on. And so's Ottawa. Ottawa will be cheering for LA in that matchup because they want the San Jose pick to drop as much as possible. St. Louis. I'll put St. Louis right up here, equal and above. Last year's run to the Stanley Cup and the victory for St. Louis, this is where the channel makes a difference. If this was before I had the channel, St. Louis would probably have dropped. St. Louis probably would have dropped. Because they beat Boston. And because they beat Dallas. And so when a team beats two of my favorite teams, they often end up down here. Montreal feasted on Vancouver, beats Boston in the playoffs. Pittsburgh beat both the Minnesota North Stars in the Stanley Cup final and Boston the same year. It's a pattern. St. Louis, though, because of the channel and because there were so many Blues fans that I connected with through the channel, I couldn't be mad. And so St. Louis with what they've done this year, there's a part of me saying, it would have been nice to see them get that back-to-back. So if the NHL figures out a way to play, I'd be interested in seeing them win a back-to-back, or at least go for it, see how far they can go. Tampa Bay. Tampa's kind of slipped into the maybe category. Tampa Bay's always been a team that I've liked. And that goes back to the Brian Bradley days after expansion. But they're, I don't know. On any given night when they're playing, it really depends on who they're playing and whether or not I'm going to be cheering for them. So seeing them as equal to San Jose, Detroit, Arizona, because again, if Arizona's against Tampa, who am I cheering for? It again depends on the situation. So for me, Tampa Bay I have right there. Toronto. This is the funny thing. If I put Toronto right here, Toronto fans go, I knew it. If I put Toronto here, Toronto fans are going to say, he still doesn't like us. But if I put the reality, which is that Toronto's right here, I then get told, nah, he wouldn't cheer for Toronto. Yeah, I would. After Babcock got fired, and again, this is where things are different. I find myself cheering for players on the Maple Leafs. I find that there are members of the Maple Leafs I like quite a bit. I like Freddie Anderson a lot as a goaltender as well. But, there are decisions made by Kyle Dubas that I've kind of gone, I don't know. But I do find myself cheering for the Leafs. I do find myself hoping the Leafs. Now, here's the thing. I don't cheer for them against Florida, and I don't cheer for them against Boston. So that would make them not top two in the division in terms of who I'm cheering for. But I still do find myself cheering for them at times. And it's one of those things that has evolved over the years. But again, I expect Toronto fans to say, well, in reality, because that's what I don't even understand. Why would I lie about that? That's so weird. Why would I just make it up? Like, if I'm going to make it up and people are like, you're doing it for views. If I want to do it for views, I'd have a video I would call I'm a Leafs fan, put on all Leafs gear, have a Leafs flag I'm waving, and scream, we're number one, we're going to win the cup, we're winning the Stanley Cup, and then I'd burn Boston gear. I'd go all out, is what I'm saying. If I wanted to do that for views, I wouldn't put them at just above maybes. I'd go all out, put them in the yes, and say they're my favorite. I don't do that. Vegas. I'm gonna put Vegas in the maybe category. Now here's the thing. I have a lot of friends and subscribers in the Las Vegas area. We've gone to Las Vegas a lot. Once the world opens up again, we're going back to Las Vegas again. I'm really, really excited. I really want to stay at the Aria again. I really enjoyed the Aria. And it's been a while since we went to Vegas now. So, it's been almost a full year, and it's going to be over a full year when we get there. Probably maybe even 2 years before we can come back. So we will enjoy every moment of it when we do get back. So Vegas, the team, I don't find myself necessarily cheering for night in and night out. But Vegas, the city, and Vegas, the fan base, I kind of sort of do. So again, that's why I've got them in the maybe category. And yes, there are a number of teams that are above that maybe category, but that's as far as I can go with that. Washington, you know what? The Capitals, I still find myself rooting for the Caps. I know the Caps won the Cup in 2018. I still see them as the underdog because of all the other failures that occurred along the way. I still see Washington as an underdog. Absolutely. I think the Washington Capitals, if they don't win another one, there will be those who look at that and go, that cup was a fluke. Yeah, they finally won the Stanley Cup. But they only won one. That was a fluke. I watched that with Calgary in 1989, where when they didn't repeat, they didn't win another Stanley Cup at all. That was a fluke. Dallas, 1999. That was a fluke. No big deal. Yeah, Dallas couldn't beat Detroit, though. Dallas didn't play Detroit. And so Washington could look at this year and go, we vindicated ourselves, and Pittsburgh fans would tap them on the shoulder and go, yeah, but still, you guys can't beat us regularly. It's like the one time you beat us, whatever. So yeah, Washington I have at that level. And then Winnipeg. Honestly, and people are going to say, well, that's because his wife cheers for Winnipeg. Yep. I always joke in live streams about how she can cheer for Boston if she wants to. If she wants to, she can cheer for Boston. And she always says, no thanks. But when her teams are out in the playoffs, she does root for Boston because she knows that that'll make me happy, and she likes that. The idea that, a team I cheer for goes further, she likes that idea. And so I have found myself rooting for Winnipeg. And not only that, but when Winnipeg lost Byfuglien, because he decided, I don't feel like it, and they seem to play better defensively than last year, and that's with losing Trouba and getting Pionk. If I had told anybody last summer they're going to lose Trouba, they're going to lose Byfuglien, and they're going to have Pionk in there, and Beaulieu's going to be like, an important player for this team. Oh, and they're still going to push for a playoff spot. I would have been told, are you crazy? Who's on their blue line? Pionk, you're crazy. What is with you? So, yeah. And this team stayed in the hunt. This is why I think they'll do very well next year, because they have cap money. They're one of the few teams that no matter what happens with this, they'll have cap money. And there's a couple of big name defensemen out there. If they can get Pietrangelo onto that blue line, there's no reason to think Winnipeg won't get better. If they can get Krug onto that blue line, there's no reason to think they won't get better. So, yeah, Winnipeg has definitely moved up the board. But that's as close as I can come to doing 1 through 31 this year. Thank you guys so much for all your support. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing right through. You just happened upon this video. And yeah, that's as close as I can get for this year. Because, again, it depends on... These teams are against each other. It depends on the situation. But I will talk to you guys again soon. Remember, stay home if you can. Stay as safe as you can if you can't. And wash your hands frequently. And all those obsessive hand washers, they were pioneers. They were right all the time. Thank you guys so much for all your support. I'll talk to you again soon.